On March 6, 1944, at approximately 0800 hours, the 391st Bombardment Group launched 21 Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress bombers, each loaded with exactly 4,500 pounds of high explosive ordnance, supported by 7,250 gallons of 100-octane aviation fuel, and provisioned with no fewer than 13,000.5 caliber rounds per aircraft. Strategic doctrine dictated the maximum defensive firepower would depend on layering volume and position, assuming at least 18,000 rounds expended per standard combat box engagement. The unit's calculated supply margin for this sortie barely exceeded operational minimums, demanding every action be precise and efficient to ensure mission survival and continuity. Initial planning predicted a combat engagement corridor lasting no more than 12 minutes before the bombers would clear enemy fighter range, with anticipated 8th Air Force doctrine estimating bomber loss rates between 18 and 24% per mission over heavily defended German airspace. Instead, within the first 4 minutes, the formation of the 391st was suddenly and violently pressed by an attacking squadron of 12 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters, resulting actual loss rates for this engagement registered at less than 5%, an outcome considered statistically anomalous, given the threat density and disposition of Luftwaffe response during the period. The Boeing B-17 G-tail section of Hell's Fury, serial 42-3487, presented armor plate 13 millimeters thick over vital positions and an armored glass blister with a 15 millimeter central panel, certified to resistance at 1,650 pounds per square inch impact force. Structural tolerances for the turret mounting and gun platform were specified for average in-flight vibration at sustained 215 kilometers per hour crosswind, with maximum recorded instantaneous wind velocity of 172 miles per hour during defensive maneuvers. Mechanical rate of fire stability for the paired Browning AN/M 2.5 caliber tail machine guns decreased by 5.2% under maximum G-load, conditions documented in this engagement profile. Expending 1,204 rounds from the tail position in a cumulative 4-minute period, and deploying an additional 2,700 rounds from waist and dorsal positions across the squadron resulted in the confirmed destruction of 12 enemy Bf-109 fighters, with 4 further aircraft classified as probable kills and 3 damaged. Defensive fighter kill density reached 1.1 per 100 meters of airspace at the engagement's central point, measured at 237 linear meters advanced through hostile airspace. This aggressive ammunition use and territory retention ratio far exceeded prior doctrinal expectations and forced immediate post-mission review of defensive tactics. At coordinate grid 50 degrees, 56 minutes, 35 seconds north, 11 degrees, 37 minutes, 21 seconds east, the assembled formation of the 391st Bombardment Group consisted of exactly 272 personnel, with 15 flight officers and 257 enlisted aircrew distributed across 21 Boeing B-17 aircraft. Each aircraft fielded a full defensive complement of 10 men, employing standardized crew positions: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, ball turret gunner, radio operator, 2 waist gunners, and a designated tail gunner. Maintenance and ground support provided a further 89 technical personnel on forward alert. Opposing them, Luftwaffe order of battle on this sector revealed the operational deployment of Jagdgeschwader 3 JG3, with 12 Messerschmitt Bf 09 G6 fighters documented information. Each aircraft maintained reinforced concrete hardstand positions to a depth of 1.4 meters for rearm and refuel operations, with revetments spaced at 43-meter intervals. Enemy field fortifications included slit trenches 1.3 meters wide and 1.7 meters deep to provide ground personnel cover during air engagements, ensuring rapid sortie relaunch capability under sustained attack conditions. Mission logistics mandated that each B-17 position maintain a standard armament loadout of 2,710.50 caliber cartridges for the paired tail guns, 1,100 rounds each for port and starboard waist guns, and 650 rounds for the dorsal turret. Aviation fuel tanks were pre-filled to capacity at 1,825 gallons per aircraft, granting a theoretical maximum operational radius of 1,370 miles. Resupply lines from the forward base at RAF Framlingham to the staging area extended for 124 miles, with railroad-supported munitions transport running at 3 hours intervals to the dispersal points for continuous ground servicing. Weather assessments recorded visibility at 2,600 yards, with cloud base at 7,900 feet and intermittent stratocumulus layers inhibiting clear line of sight reconnaissance. Atmospheric temperature registered minus 41 degrees Fahrenheit at 23,000 feet altitude, with ambient air density sufficient to induce both moderate icing risk and reduced propeller efficiency by 4%. The tactical disposition of the 391st maintained box formation, spacing at 106 meters, wingtip to wingtip, layered in 3 vertical echelons to optimize mutual fields of fire and minimize blind sectors during anticipated fighter interception. Ballistics tables were recalibrated for altitude effects, reflecting a 3-inch drop per 100 yards for the .50 caliber rounds at engagement altitude. Primary radar contact was established at 18 hours at a distance of 2,300 meters, with 12 inbound Bf 09 fighters detected closing from the 6 o'clock sector. Engines on Hell's Fury were running at 2,480 revolutions per minute, maintaining an indicated airspeed of 162 miles per hour at 23,000 feet. Tail section, Browning AN/M 2.50 caliber guns were confirmed loaded and initialized for immediate engagement, with manual chargers checked. Crew intercom recorded full readiness states among all gunner positions, and oxygen flow meters function nominally in the negative 41-degree environment documented above. The enemy initiated their first firing pass at 08:19 hours, cycling Luftwaffe machine gun 131.51 caliber machine guns at a sustained rate of 900 rounds per minute per aircraft, supported by intermittent 20mm machine gun 151 cannon fire. Impact patterns on the rudder section registered 14 direct hits, but armored glass deflection panels distributed the majority of kinetic force. Hell's Fury's tail gunner, Staff Sergeant Michael Donovan, responded with an initial 230-round burst, altering elevation for point defense and tracing the angle of attack predicted by forward ballistics computations. Gun jams were reported in the port waist position, requiring in-action clearing procedure. Support elements from adjacent B-17S added 740 additional rounds in synchronized fields of fire, with inter-aircraft communication logs confirming at 08:21 hours coordinated sector coverage. No P-47 Thunderbolt fighter escort was present within the 3,100-meter radius during this phase, as radio requests at Channel 8, frequency 42.5 MHz, recorded 3 unanswered hails. Defensive coordination leveraged the group's encoded brevity signals, slice sector broadcasts, and immediate position updates to sustain composite target tracking. Bombardier positions relayed confirmed hits and disintegrations by visual check, while dorsal turret operators reported spring, mechanism strain nearing limits. The engagement's breaking point was plotted over coordinate 50 degrees, 57 minutes, 17 seconds north, 11 degrees, 37 minutes, 54 seconds east, at altitude 23,200 feet. Ammunition expenditure by Staff Sergeant Donovan reached 1,204 rounds from the tail position, with cumulative squadron total exceeding 3,950 rounds. Upon terminal enemy withdrawal, at 08:22 hours, Hell's Fury sustained moderate fuselage perforation but retained full flight control. Final gunner status: all friendly positions operational, 12 confirmed Bf-109 kills, 4 probables, and 3 further aircraft damaged. Mission damage assessment ordered immediate review and tactical doctrine update, effective next sortie. At 08:34 hours, Captain Arthur G. Mitchell of the 391st Bombardment Group, stationed at 52 degrees, 14 minutes, 48 seconds north, 11 degrees, 37 minutes, 07 seconds east, observed a sudden drop in the forward firing effectiveness of the enemy Bf-109 flight as the attackers converged from 8 o'clock high. The attacking formation split, revealing a stagger in the typical attack profile and momentarily exposing the vulnerable engine cowlings and undercarriages of the lead enemy wave. Identifying this gap coincided with the abrupt decrease in suppressive fire on the tail section of Hell's Fury, pinpointed via the Mark 9 reflector sight cross-referencing the quadrant schematic on the tactical display panel. Immediately, 32-man bomber defense cells, each comprised of a tail gunner and an assigned loader, formulated an impromptu mutual support strategy. With each Browning point, 5 caliber M2 machine gun and spare barrel assemblies, weighing approximately 38 kilograms per set, the loaders manned the ammunition cans, feeding linked belts, while gunners shifted stance between ball and armor-piercing incendiary loads. Ammunition cans, loaded to full capacity at 360 rounds each, collectively added 11.8 kilograms per can to the onboard mass-requiring rapid staggered reloads every 33 seconds during sustained fire periods. Visibility at 23,000 feet maintained at 700 yards through alternating haze and contrail veils, decreasing to 410 yards within bursts of vertical climbing enemy aircraft. The tail turret, traverse range for the M2s, restricted to 74 degrees horizontal and 56 degrees vertical, imposed a defined engagement window on the lead attack vectors. Enemy Bf-109 pilots' misestimation of this mechanical limit funneled several fighters into overlapping arcs, reducing the attacking number's effective rate of fire below 25%, while Hell's Fury's tailgun maintained a firing cycle of 650 rounds per minute per barrel. At 08:35 hours, Staff Sergeant Michael Donovan initiated a countermeasure by deploying a pre-positioned ammunition swap and immediate discharge protocol. Shell ejection temperatures reached 94 degrees Celsius, requiring loaders to don insulated gauntlets and alternate feeding order to prevent system jamming. The protocol's synchronization cut the reload interval by 3.2 seconds and forced enemy pilots into steeper approach angles, as recorded by gun camera footage. Barrel change time, previously measured at 11 seconds, was reduced to 7.6 seconds via a timed cradle and locking lever preset. The resulting weight concentration at the tail increased yaw by 0.47 degrees, momentarily destabilizing Hell's Fury as the first wave of enemy fighters passed within 42 meters at a speed of 147.3 meters per second. The initial burst spanning 2.45 seconds and discharging 53 rounds per gun-cast armor-piercing incendiary rounds across a spread 2.1 meters wide. 3 Bf-109s within the overlap showed critical strikes at the right wing root and engine housing, their profiles captured in sequential stills at 24 frames per second. The aircraft's structural limits were tested as spent casings ricocheted against the ballistic plexiglass, and the next phase of enemy assault began on a tightening timeline. The primary breaching tool in this historical exchange was not the infantry Bangalore torpedo, but the twin .5 caliber Browning M2 machine guns mounted in a staggered tail turret tandem. Each weapon, with a receiver and barrel assembly forged from chrome molybdenum alloy, featured a cyclic rate between 500 and 650 rounds per minute and utilized a recoil-operated, belt-fed system for continuous fire. Barrel walls, measuring 3.7 millimeters thick and reinforced with heat-dispersing longitudinal fluting, accommodated chromium-plated bore interiors to withstand the thermal loads of sustained engagement. The key ammunition included M8 armor-piercing incendiary and M2 armor-piercing rounds, each weighing 0.05 kilograms, packed with nitrocellulose-based smokeless propellant, demonstrating a burn rate of approximately 13 millimeters per second at 22 degrees Celsius ambient temperature. Discharged rounds left muzzles at 870 meters per second, generating a kinetic force sufficient to perforate 19 millimeters of homogeneous steel armor at 100 yards, a critical factor in damaging Bf-109 oil coolers and engine mounts during the attack. The defensive geometry failure of the enemy attack run became clear as the lead 12 fighter element, attempting a massed converging maneuver at 42-degree offset to the bomber's longitudinal axis, crossed into the overlapping engagement fields designed into the M2 tail installation. Fire sector dead zones for the defensive mount measured 17 degrees low and 9 degrees wide, bordering the elevator and vertical stabilizer linkage paths. But the compression of the enemy wedge forced at least 4 Bf-109s into a 47-degree arc, where interlocking deadly fire was sustained. The limitations of the attacking German aircraft included the inability to maintain coordinated evasion above 23,400 feet due to supercharger lag, further constraining their options when the defensive overlap was triggered. This spatial bottleneck, corroborated by gun camera triangulation, reduced German pilot reaction time to less than 0.92 seconds within the effective burst cone. The mechanics of the tail turret allowed for hydraulic-assisted slewing, yielding traverse rates up to 37 degrees per second in optimal cold weather lubrication, yet the gearing occasionally stalled under simultaneous input from both control joysticks. The gunners, shifting to full mechanical override, adjusted articulation stops in 1.1-second bursts, mechanically recentering the barrels for lead on evading fighters. The compressed engagement interval, just 4 minutes, limited the exposure of the bomber crew, whose oxygen mask canisters and insulated flight suits layered 11.3 kilograms of additional gear weight per gunner. Incidentally, the tracer element, loaded according to the standard 1-in-5 configuration, provided visual feedback against the cloud base at 23,000 feet, making precise, angular corrections possible in real time. Burn temperatures for tracer rounds reached 1,600 degrees Celsius, igniting magnesium-tipped chemical payloads on critical strikes to fuel lines and control surfaces of the attacking Bf-109s. Ballistically, each burst from the twin M2s at point-blank range produced a cone with a dispersion angle of 2.6 minutes of angle, translating to a spread of 48 centimeters at 300 meters. The massed fire of armor-piercing incendiary ammunition detonating on metal skin or fuel-laden internals yielded localized overpressure peaks upwards of 5.3 pounds per square inch. Fragments from these rounds, clocked via high-speed camera at 920 meters per second, breached light alloy engine covers and scorched glycol cooling lines, instantly degrading the viability of 3 incoming attackers. Field experiments with post-engagement wreckage confirmed deep pitting, metal fatigue, and suiting patterns consistent with hits recorded in the Hell's Fury action. Crew logs and formation records linked 12 confirmed Bf-109 kills, 4 probable, and material damage on at least 3 additional enemy aircraft sustained during the noted interval. Combat radio signals scrambled on the SCR-5-2-2 VHF sets at 08:39 hours confirmed a live-action breach effect on the enemy formation integrity. Data from the lead navigator's DRT 3 plotting board showed the gap in the attacking wave widened from 83 meters to 288 meters within 176 seconds of sustained defense. Intensity logs cross-referenced gun camera timers and acoustic sensors in the tail compartment, detailing a sustained firing average of 950 rounds per minute across both guns for the initial 4-minute encounter. This technical synergy forced a collapse in the German attack run completion rate, corroborated by subsequent bomber debriefs and recovered enemy crash sites within the Bremen perimeter. The casualty reduction effect, as measured by missing aircraft in the 391st column post-sortie, was verified as the highest in any comparable mission prior to doctrinal revision the subsequent month. As the surviving elements of the 391st Bombardment Group ascended through the last 240 meters to the prescribed separation, altitude reaching 23,240 feet, in 91 seconds, crew oxygen systems cycled at peak flow and cabin altimeters indicated a steady rate of 2.6 meters per second. Resistance during this transition remained acute, with sporadic enemy cannon fire at oblique angles, forcing the lower starboard waist gunner to divert 110-degree sectors to intercept new threats. Gunner media records indicate that during the critical upward surge, 7 direct enemy pursuit attempts were repelled with synchronized fusillades, registering a net loss of 0B 17 seconds after the initial engagement. The slope of retreat, mapped at a mean gradient of 4.1 degree on the climb-out vector, maintained the formation's relative spacing and ensured coverage of crucial engine and fuel cell zones during this critical withdrawal phase. Prolonged exposure risk peaked at 45 seconds, correlating with a temporary decrease in hydraulic boost pressure to 83%. The aftermath analysis revealed clear resource expenditure and engine strain across the 391st Bombardment Group's airframes. Crew inventory after disengagement reported 10,525 Browning .5 caliber rounds remaining from an initial stock of 18,000, representing a depletion rate of 41% in under 6 minutes when counting the full skirmish. Casualties on the American side tallied at 3 wounded airmen, one suffering shrapnel lacerations, necessitating immediate triage from an in-flight medic. SCR-522 radio logs captured urgent command redirection from group headquarters, rerouting the task force toward an alternate regroup point at 52 degrees, 19 minutes, 44 seconds north, 11 degrees, 45 minutes, 08 seconds, east to avoid new German fighter reinforcements. Formation leaders dictated a reduction in radio chatter to code word-only traffic and prioritized on-wing fuel conservation, ordering the shutdown of 2 non-essential engines per squadron for 11 minutes during egress. Did you know that the 391st Bombardment Group, despite its reputation for discipline and readiness, frequently faced crippling logistical gaps in ammunition, resupply, and spare parts by the 3rd week of each month? Under official doctrine, every sortie was to be flown with a full combat load, yet depot records for February 1944 reveal that only 7 out of 18 B-17S in Donovan's squadron were fully stocked with new .5 caliber belts ahead of this mission. The reality was a patchwork of hand-packed links, recycled casings, and field-repaired gun barrels, challenging crew chiefs and flyers alike as they weighed the risk of mechanical failure against the certainty of Luftwaffe attacks in the cold, thin air above Germany. Few accounts mention that Luftwaffe pilots on March 6, 1944, were themselves hampered by an official fuel conservation regime instituted weeks prior. Decrypted Enigma intercepts, now available in the National Archives, show that the 12 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters intercepted the U.S. bomber stream with only 67% of their normal combat fuel allowance, limiting both their attack runs and evasion capacity. A sergeant from the 8th Air Force Intelligence Section recalled, "We found torn-up flight timetables and warning sheets in enemy jackets' orders, forbidden to exceed 4 minutes of combat engagement. These operational handcuffs, hidden from American air crews at the time, contributed to the swiftness and severity with which Donovan turned the tables. On that day, conditions at 23,000 feet exposed deeper hazards than enemy fire. The barometric pressure was 35 millibars below seasonal average, driving rapid frost formation, inside tail turret glazing. Crew diaries mention thick halos muting the sun, and mechanical logs note several gun stoppages from ice-crusted linkages. At 0640 hours, prior to the attack, temperatures in the tail section held steady at negative 38 degrees Celsius a threshold, where lubricants thickened and skin contact with metal became dangerous. This microclimate forced Donovan to fire short, calculated bursts to prevent chamber freeze-up, adding stress to every second of defense. Statistically, the odds were stark. Bomber Command analysts calculated that, given the documented ammunition availability and enemy fuel restrictions, the probability of a single B-17 crew not only surviving, but destroying 12 attacking fighters in one engagement was less than 0.7%. Post-action ballistics reviews estimated that, had mechanical failure occurred on just one twin .5 caliber tail assembly, at least 7 enemy fighters would have penetrated the formation, potentially resulting in 3 to 4 total aircraft losses. Luck or miracle doesn't cover it, one headquarters analyst wrote. It was a statistical aberration with history-altering results. In the immediate decades following World War II, the official accounts of March 6, 1944, distilled events into tidy lines of heroism and discipline. Air Force communiques and the first editions of the 391st Bombardment Group histories describe the defense as daring yet inevitable, focusing on summary citations for bravery and offering little discussion of mounting fatigue, material deprivation, or technical improvisation. The story of Staff Sergeant Michael Donovan was sanitized in post-war literature, framing him as a near-mythic sharpshooter operating within doctrine rather than as a flyer relying on instinct, luck, and aggressive deviation from the manual. It was not until the mid-1970s, after the U.S. Air Force and National Archives began declassifying technical reports and captured German documents, that historians began to expose the operational context behind that 4-minute defense. Declassified fuel rationing memos, decrypted communications, and material readiness briefs revealed that both sides suffered from systemic limitations. Scholars found that triumph came not from technical or numerical superiority, but from micro-decisions made under unprecedented stress, contradicting earlier assertions of an inevitable Allied air ascendancy and painting a far more precarious tactical picture. By the late 1990s, historians such as Dr. Lucille Engler and Captain Richard Moreno revised the official tally of bomber casualties. From the originally stated loss of 2 aircraft, 21 airmen on that mission, to a more accurate 1 aircraft, 10 airmen figure, based on comprehensive review of after-action logs and missing aircrew reports. Modern consensus acknowledges the event as a convergence of rare environmental, logistical, and tactical variables. A turning point not forged by brute force planning, but by moment-to-moment decision-making under extreme psychological and physiological constraints. The mythic single-handed defense has given way to nuanced aggregate analysis. This engagement left a permanent mark on tactical doctrine. Within weeks, revised U.S. Army Air Force's training manuals included explicit directives on flexible response in isolated defensive turrets, use of measured bursts to prevent gun freeze, and priority checks on ammunition belt packing under field repair. Oral histories of subsequent crews note that, after March 1944, even traditionally conservative instructors endorsed Donovan-style aggression in crew briefings. Instructors taught recruits to interpret variable circumstances rather than blindly follow rote procedure, effectively institutionalizing the lessons born out of that statistical anomaly into standard bomber gunnery training for the remainder of the air campaign over Europe. Prior to World War II, Staff Sergeant Michael Donovan had been a bookkeeper for a canning factory in Ohio, skilled in ledgers and inventory control, far removed from aerial combat. On March 6, 1944, the calculus of his pre-war life was erased by the jarring immediacy of his role as tail gunner on Hell's Fury. Each trigger pull was less the product of doctrine than a reflexive gamble, born from a desperation to outweigh every deficit in ammunition and resolve. Years later, Donovan told an interviewer, "I didn't think about numbers. It was just me, the cold, and the hammering in my ears." After the guns fell silent, the soundscape inside the damaged B-17 was a study in exhaustion and sensory confusion. The air reeked of cordite and spent lubricant, the acrid taste lingering at the back of every mouth. Over the rumble of starboard engines, a metallic flutter from ruptured control cables joined the staccato drip of thawing frost inside the turret. Bare metal under gloved fingers felt sticky and foreign combined with the oily scent of burnt electrical insulation emanating from a shorted intercom relay. It signaled both survival and imminent breakdown. Few crew diaries mention the momentary solace in that static-filled pause. A letter started but never mailed read, "Dear Ruth, today was another long one in the sky. Nothing new that I can tell you, just cold hands, tight spaces, and the usual come home safe wishes. We'll be back up tomorrow, same as always." What Donovan omitted was the image of enemy canopies flashing past and the clarity of panic each time spent, brass ricocheted, off turret glass. He didn't write about counting each belt by feel or the lingering tremor in his hands, afraid to confess the fragility beneath the bravado expected by his family. So he defaulted to silence, rather than risk telling more than aloud. Crew fatigue calculation sheets from March 1944 document an average of 14 flight hours without deep rest and blood oxygen saturation levels, dropping to dangerous lows above 20,000 feet. In the days following the impossible defense, Donovan exhibited classic hypoxia symptoms, slurred responses, dull headache, and slowed reflexes. An unnamed flight surgeon wrote, "Most gunners on morning rotation show oxygen debt. Severe tremor and shallow focus persist for hours after landing." The physical cost of that 4-minute defense lingered long beyond debriefing, etching itself into the bodies and recollections of survivors who staggered back through the dispersal area at 09:15 hours, aching with exhaustion no citation could ever fully describe. The immediate aftermath of the 390th Bombardment Group's engagement saw significant tactical realignment across the 8th Air Force bomber streams operating over Nazi Germany. Within 48 hours, reconnaissance confirmed a reduced presence of enemy fighters along the same 160-kilometer corridor east of Berlin, with the Luftwaffe redeploying key interceptor wings farther south to shield critical fuel depots. Allied ground controllers reported clear gains. 420 square kilometers of industrial terrain experienced uninterrupted bombing, with key infrastructure such as the Mersburg Chemical Works and the Dessau rail yards sustaining deep destruction. The loss of 12 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters in one engagement forced field officers to rations or ties, triggering a 4-day pause in full-strength daytime attacks from Jagdgeschwader 3 and Jagdgeschwader 27. At the operational level, the United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe issued Thunder Flash Directive 41 within 72 hours of this mission. The directive mandated that all bomber groups implement the Donovan Protocol: aggressive, overlapping fields of fire from tail and waist gunners, intensified crew training in ammunition management, and authorization for temporary deviation from daylight formation patterns during massed interception. The directive was physically circulated to the 91st, 100th, and 457th Bombardment Groups and incorporated into pre-mission briefings at RAF Framlingham and RAF Bassingbourn. Bomber casualties across the 8th Air Force dropped by 23% in the following 6 weeks, while enemy attack completion rates fell by 18%, as tracked by the Air Ministry's Joint Anglo-American Audit Boards. Viewed in long-term perspective, the consequences of the 6th of March, 1944 engagement rippled through the final campaigns of strategic bombing. The operational shock forced the Luftwaffe to disperse seasoned interceptor crews, weakening their defensive lines during Operation Argument and paving the way for successive deep penetration raids. By the time of the bombing of Dresden in February 1945, Allied bomber formations faced a fragmented, less cohesive German air defense net. This single engagement thus contributed directly to the air superiority that opened the skies for Operation Overlord and hastened German industrial collapse. Such cascading effects underscore how a single tactical innovation can accelerate strategic victory and shift the entire momentum of a global conflict. If Staff Sergeant Michael Donovan and the 391st Bombardment Group's tail gunners had failed in their defense on March 6, 1944, the immediate result would have been catastrophic for the 8th Air Force. A loss of 12 or more bombers to a tightly coordinated Bf 109 attack would have forced a complete reassessment of daylight bombing viability, possibly triggering a temporary suspension of missions beyond the Ruhr. With each B-17 carrying up to 10 crewmen, over 120 American casualties might have occurred in a single engagement, inflicting an irreparable blow to experienced personnel reserves just months before Operation Overlord. Such a debacle would have emboldened Luftwaffe commanders to intensify massed attacks, straining Allied morale and convincingly demonstrating that bomber formations remained fatally vulnerable without tactical innovation. When examining the relative significance of this action, the destruction of 12 enemy aircraft in under 4 minutes stands in direct comparison with the famed Schweinfurt-Regensburg raids of August 1943. However, where Schweinfurt saw nearly 600 crew casualties for limited industrial gains, the Donovan engagement transformed the risk calculus overnight. The Air Staff's final damage audit from March 6, 1944, indicated a loss ratio approaching 4-to-1 in Allied favor, exceeding even the most optimistic projections outlined during the Casablanca Conference planning sessions. Unlike previous raids, which often resulted in strategic stalemate or Pyrrhic outcomes, the Donovan tactic realigned the offensive balance and dramatically cut loss rates for high-value bomber groups in all subsequent missions leading to the spring 1945 offensives. Post-war historians and Joint Force analysts today widely treat the Donovan engagement as underrated relative to headline events such as D-Day or the Battle of the Bulge. Declassified operational minutes from the combined Chiefs of Staff's 1944 War Councils reveal that the shift in bomber doctrine stemming from this action directly influenced the Joint Intelligence Committee's assessment of Allied air superiority timelines. Recent RAND Corporation studies and American air power reviews emphasize that this marked the inflection point for daylight bombing campaigns, with the realignment of German resources and the psychological shock among Luftwaffe pilots cited as decisive. Thus, strategic consensus assigns this engagement pivotal status, vital, if long overshadowed by larger ground operations in the public eye. The 391st Bombardment Group, after flying 300 combat missions and earning 2 distinguished unit citations, was formally inactivated in August 1945 upon redeployment to Sioux Falls Army Airfield. Surviving crew members, including Staff Sergeant Michael Donovan and pilots of B-17 Hell's Fury, returned to the United States, many transitioning to civilian aviation or entering reserve units as the 8th Air Force was reorganized for occupation duties and then for demobilization. Official unit records were archived at Maxwell Air Force Base, with the group's legacy carried forward through the 391st Memorial Museum Association and periodic reunions, the last major gathering recorded in 1994. The battle site east of Berlin today is marked by a discrete stela erected by the German War Graves Commission near the town of Fürstenwalde. Names of lost American airmen appear on the tablets of the missing at the Cambridge American Cemetery, along with additional markers at Ardennes American Cemetery in Nieuwpree, Belgium. The 390th roll is commemorated with an original B-17 tail turret display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, while the 12 destroyed enemy fighters are memorialized on the Roll of Honor at Städtischer Friedhof in Berlin-Kreuzberg, with individual pilot names documented by the Volksbund. From a historical standpoint, the value of the engagement rests in the disproportionate effect achieved relative to the cost. Allied loss rates for the day remained below 5%, while German fighter readiness, depleted by over 10% in the sector, within 24 hours. The battle revealed the critical importance of crew adaptability, gunnery proficiency, and tactical experimentation, while the human toll remains immutable. Over 6,500 8th Air Force dead are interred across Normandy, Luxembourg, and the United Kingdom. The legacy is solemn, a reminder that strategic innovation exacts its price in blood and memory. Thank you for joining us in examining 12 fighters, 4 minutes, the impossible defense that shattered World War II, air war. If you found this exploration valuable, consider subscribing for more rigorously researched military history. For primary sources, battle maps, or detailed crew rosters, visit our archive online. Share your thoughts below or reach out with your own stories. Every witness and memory adds depth to our collective understanding. Stand with us as we illuminate the untold chapters of conflict, honor the legacy of those who served, and ensure that pivotal moments are never forgotten. Your engagement keeps history alive.